It's a warm Tuesday afternoon outside Paris. The most beautiful aircraft ever built is rolling down the runway, nose tilted to the sky. Then a passerby sees it, a long ribbon of orange flame trailing from beneath the left wing. The crowd doesn't know it yet, but the age of supersonic travel is about to end. In this video, you'll find out how a thin strip of metal, no longer than a ruler, brought down a $40 million marvel of engineering in under 2 minutes. You'll hear what the cockpit voice recorder captured in the final seconds. You will learn why the crew never really had a chance. And you will see how the single afternoon ended one of the boldest dreams in aviation history. This is the story of Air France Flight 4590. The aircraft was a Concorde, a supersonic airliner that could cross the Atlantic in under 3.5 hours, flying faster than a rifle bullet at the edge of space. This one carried the registration F-BTSC. The date was July 25th, 2000. Flight 4590 was a charter booked to fly from Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris to New York. On board were 100 passengers, most of them German tourists, on their way to join a luxury cruise ship in New York bound for Caribbean. In the cockpit sat 3 veterans. Captain Christian Marty, 44 years old with more than 13,000 flight hours. He was famous beyond aviation. In 1982, he became the first person to windsurf across the Atlantic Ocean. Beside him, First Officer John Marcotte, 55 over 10,000 hours, nearly 2,700 of them on the Concorde itself. And behind them, flight engineer Gilles Jardineau, 58, monitoring the dials and the systems, with more than 12,000 hours of his own. 3 experienced men, 1 extraordinary machine, 109 souls on board. The afternoon began like any other. The Concorde was fully fueled and slightly over its recommended takeoff weight, but within limits. The wind was light. The crew ran their checks. At 17 minutes past 2 in the afternoon, the tower cleared flight 4590 for takeoff. The captain pushed the throttles forward and 99 tons of aircraft began to accelerate down runway 26 right. Everything for a few seconds was perfectly normal, but unknown to the crew, the runway ahead was not clear. Lying on the concrete was a thin strip of titanium metal, about 17 inches long. It had fallen off a Continental Airlines DC-10 that had taken off just minutes earlier. As the Concorde raced past roughly 180 miles an hour, the left main landing gear rose directly over that strip of metal. The tire didn't just puncture, it exploded, throwing a chunk of rubber weighing nearly 9 pounds upwards into underside of the left wing. Now, here is the part that surprises people. That piece of rubber did not pierce the fuel tank. It didn't need to. The tank above was completely full of jet fuel. When the heavy fragment slammed into it, it sent a violent pressure wave through the liquid inside, like slapping the surface of a full bathtub. That shock wave blew out a section of the tank from the inside. Fuel began pouring out of the wing at an enormous rate, roughly 60 litres every second. And then it found the source of ignition, most likely an electrical spark from the damaged landing gear wiring. From this moment, the crew had less than 2 minutes. The aircraft was already past the speed where stopping safely was possible. The captain had no choice but to lift off. As the Concorde climbed away, 2 of its 4 engines, both on the burning left side, began losing power. In the cockpit, alarms screamed. The fire warning sounded again and again. The crew tried to raise the landing gear to reduce drag, but the gear, mangled by the explosion, refused to retract. The first officer made a desperate call to the controllers. First officer said, "Le Bourget, le Bourget." They were trying to reach a smaller airfield nearby for an emergency landing, but the aircraft couldn't climb. With the left engines failing and the gear stuck down, the Concorde could not get above about 200 feet. It began to roll and slow. The ground proximity warning blared, and then the last of the power on the left side fell away. About a minute and a half after the takeoff began, the Concorde stalled and rolled to the left. It came down in the suburb of Gonesse, striking a small hotel. All 109 people on board were killed and 4 people on the ground died as well. It was the first fatal crash in Concorde's 24 years of passenger service. The crash was front page news around the world within hours. Investigators from France's Accident Bureau, the BEA, arrived at the site, led by Chief Investigator Alain Boulard. One of their first breakthroughs came not from the hotel, but from the runway itself. There, they found a 32-centimeter piece of the Concorde's own fuel tank, and nearby the strip of titanium that had started it all. That strip became the key piece of evidence. Investigators traced it back to Continental Airlines DC-10 that had departed minutes before Concorde. The metal had been fitted during a repair and had fallen onto the runway. Years later, a French court would weigh whether Continental and one of its mechanics bore responsibility. A legal battle that stretched on long after the wreckage was cleared. When the BEA released its final report in January 2002, it laid out a chain of events that was almost cruel in its simplicity. A piece of debris on the runway, a burst tire, a fuel tank ruptured by pressure, not puncture, a massive fuel leak, ignition, and the loss of engines on one side of the aircraft. But the report revealed something more uncomfortable. This wasn't entirely without warning. Over its years in service, the Concorde had suffered around 70 tire-related incidents, several of them serious. As far back as 1981, American investigators had written to their French counterparts warning that blown tires during takeoff could be, in their words, potentially catastrophic. The warning had been there for almost 20 years. On this afternoon, it came through. The Concorde was grounded. Its certification of airworthiness, its legal permission to fly, was suspended. Engineers launched an expensive rescue effort. They linked the fuel tanks with Kevlar, the same material used in body armor, to resist rupture. They developed new burst-resistant tire built by Michelin. They rerouted electrical wiring in the landing gear to remove ignition sources. It worked, technically. The Concorde returned to service in November 2001. After a safety program costing tens of millions. But the magic was gone. Passengers' confidence never fully recovered. Costs kept climbing, and just 2 years later, both Air France and British Airways retired the Concorde for good. The age of supersonic passenger travel was over, and decades later, it still hasn't returned. The fastest passenger plane ever built was undone by a strip of metal smaller than your forearm. Sometimes the greatest machines we make are brought down by the smallest things we overlook. If this story moved you, subscribe and hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel. Keep telling these stories and tell me in the comments, do you think supersonic passenger flight will ever come back? I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for your time.